We are in the middle of thinking about the real things that God has told us in the Bible. In superhero story style, aren't we? And we figured out that a good superhero story needs 7 things, right? Stand up with me and let's go through the actions of those, okay? We know it needs a place. We know it needs a hero. We know it needs a bad guy. We know it needs a problem. We know it needs a fight. We know it needs victory for the hero. And then we know it needs settling into life again. Nice job. You can sit down. So in our picture from yesterday, we understood some of these things about our superhero story, didn't we? So let's recreate this picture again, okay? What does the gold represent? It represents God, doesn't it? And what are the words that we are concentrating on about him? What's the G word? Yep, good. The word good. God is good. And the O word? Yeah, omnipotence. It means God is powerful, all-powerful, and he can do anything and everything. And our surprising D word? Daring, wasn't it? Yes. Which means God is not afraid, and he will do the unexpected. And then the last thing that we talked about, God, was that he is the creator. What does this stand for? That stands for, right, the angels, doesn't it? The good angels who are in fellowship with God and living with him, obeying him, and those, Lucifer, and the ones that have rebelled with him. And we ended yesterday asking ourselves the question that if Adam and Eve, God's special creation, were that special, who would the traitor, Lucifer, try to go after to try to wreck what God had in mind, right? And what will be the opportunity? So today I have another characteristic I want to ask you about. It's a negative one, just like traitor is a negative one. Do you know the word deceiver? A deceiver is someone who on purpose tries to trick someone else into believing something that is not true. In superhero stories, the bad guy is usually a deceiver. You know, like we said yesterday, the Bible tells us that God put Adam and Eve in a special place that he had prepared for them, a garden. God, this is amazing, but God would come and talk with them. He told them things about the earth, the ground, about the animals, about how to live in the garden, and he gave them freedom to do whatever they wanted to do, except for one thing, right? There was one thing that he gave them a direct command that they should not do. We read about it in Genesis chapter 2. This is what it says. God said to them, "You may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die." What? Die? Death is a word that you and I know about. We've seen it. But you know what? Death was a totally new thing for Adam and Eve to think about. It sounded serious. They had no intention of eating fruit from that tree. Well, let's stop a minute and think about that fruit. I have an apple here. Was the fruit of the tree that God was talking about to Adam and Eve poisonous, maybe? So that if they took a bite of it, they would fall over dead on the spot? We have fairy tales that talk about that kind of stuff, like Snow White taking a bite of an apple and falling over into sleep. Actually, no. It was not that kind of fruit. In fact, the issue was not the fruit at all. The real issue was whether Adam and Eve would trust and obey God. It was a test. Well, Adam and Eve were not the only ones who heard that command that God gave them. Lucifer had heard it too. And he saw that this command would be his opportunity to get back at God. What was he thinking? He would go after Adam and Eve, but he would do it in superhero story style as a deceiver. His thought was, if I can get the first people to believe a lie about God and turn against him, God will have to separate himself from them. His own law will require him to punish them with the death, just like he said. And they won't be able to be rescued. He won't wipe them out. But without God, they will be weak. And I will be able to capture them for my kingdom. They'll work for and worship me. And not only Adam and Eve, but everyone who is born after them will be in the same condition, separated from God, rebels who are required by God's own law to be punished by death, and they'll be captives in my kingdom. So what did he do? Do you know what he did? He disguised himself. Using the body of a snake, he appeared to be friendly and helpful. What? You know, if a snake came and talked to you or to me, we would freak out, wouldn't we? It seems impossible to us that Adam and Eve would not have been just shocked to have an animal talk with them, because that certainly does not happen now, does it? But things in the garden were way different from the things that are on earth now. You know what else Lucifer did? He presented himself as if he was the good guy, and he was looking after them. And then he boldly told them that what God had said about the tree wasn't true. They surely were not going to die. You know what? He was claiming that God was a liar. That's not God's characteristic. That's Lucifer's characteristic. And then he went after the characteristic that we are talking about, God's goodness. He was implying that God was not good, and he could not be trusted because he was trying to keep Adam and Eve from something that would be good for them, the good taste of the fruit and being wise. Oh, Lucifer's deceitful ways worked. Genesis chapter 3 tells us that Adam and Eve made a terrible choice. They turned away from God, just like Lucifer. They only thought about themselves, and they chose to rebel. They deliberately ate the fruit. And just like God said, they died. Now, they didn't just fall over in immediate death, physical death. That's the death that we are most familiar with, right? The part that has to do with our body. But all humans have invisible parts too. We can't see our thoughts, and we make choices, and we have feelings, and most importantly, we have the ability to connect with God. We call those invisible parts of us soul or spirit. And those parts of us are not the parts that die when our bodies die. For Adam and Eve, they immediately lost the ability of their spirits to be in happy connection with God. They still knew God was there, and they knew that they needed to face him, but now you know what? They were afraid of him. And in their minds, they turned against him and started to believe that he was the enemy. Oh my, that was a huge and shocking change. You know, it's hard for us to understand, to know what it might have felt to them to have that change. But you may have experienced something that feels like immediate and dramatic change. Have you ever been in your house during a storm when the electricity goes off? All of a sudden, where there used to be light and power and sounds like the TV or the air conditioner or the refrigerator, it all stopped. There's this weird sense of emptiness and change, and we don't like it. Sometimes we get really upset, and depending on what time of day or night it is, we may start to worry about what are we going to do? And we certainly hope the problem won't last long, don't we? Well, you know what? Up to this point, Adam and Eve, in Adam and Eve's life, they had only known the goodness of God and all that he had given him. But they chose evil, and evil has no place with God. Lucifer knew that about God, and he knows that God is always fair and trustworthy. So he knew that by God's own law, he would have to punish Adam and Eve by the consequence that he said, death, separation. When Adam and Eve ate that fruit, the separation, just imagine, the separation was immediate, and it was shocking to them, and they knew it was serious. In fact, it was so serious they were afraid, and they went and they hid. Genesis 3 tells us that God came and talked to Adam and Eve and to Lucifer. He asked Adam and Eve, what happened? Not that he didn't know. He knows everything, doesn't he? But they were not willing to take responsibility for what they had done. They blamed somebody else. As we know, decisions and actions have consequences. And so in addition to that tragic break in relationship with God, which is what spiritual death is, the process of physical death and decay also began. Their bodies would be vulnerable to sickness and weakness and dying. And amazingly, because of their disobedience, even the ground, the earth, and everything that is on it would also be captive to decay and disease. Living would be difficult, painful, and relationships would be a struggle. Whoa, that's heavy. Did our hero, God, say anything to Lucifer? Lucifer knows that he is no match for God in power and in wisdom, but he thinks that his deceiver ways have pulled off a defeat from which there is no recovery. He's feeling confident because he feels sure that nothing can reverse the outcome of death. Even when he heard God pronounce a mysterious prediction about what Lucifer's future punishment would be, he felt confident he could win. Now, we might be tempted to think that all this took God by surprise, but it didn't. Nothing takes God by surprise. In fact, the Bible tells us that God's plan was already in place when he created the heavens and the earth. He knew Lucifer's challenge. He knew Lucifer and his ways and what he would do. And he knew Adam and Eve and what they would have to face, the challenge of a test. I forgot to put the earth up again. Let's put that on again, because that's... Go. Adam and Eve failed the test, right? But God knew that they would. It doesn't mean they were out of God's story. But Adam and Eve no longer had that natural connection and access to God. But God still loved them deeply. And as the sovereign God and creator, he had the right and the power to offer them a way to reconnect with him if they would turn back. We read about it a lot in the Old Testament. It does still have to do with death. It's not a clear picture here, but the offering of a lamb as a substitute, as an offering to God, would be a a short-term, temporary way to rescue Adam and Eve and the people who lived after them. It's a symbol, it's a picture of the daring rescue that God had in mind that would be permanent. Now, did you catch that a few minutes ago I said that God made a mysterious prediction about Lucifer's punishment? What God said was that sometime in the future, someone's heel was going to be bruised or crushed, and someone else's head would be bruised or crushed. A heel bruise sounds painful. A head bruise sounds serious. Like somebody might even die from a head bruise. I wonder, whose heel? Whose head? You know, one thing for sure we can see in this lesson. The choice of turning toward God or turning away from God is very serious business. Just like our memory verse says. It tells us how widespread the problem is. As it is written, meaning what the Bible tells us is, none is righteous. No, not one. No one understands. No one seeks for God. All have turned away. Oh my. What a problem. We know from our list that the next thing on our superhero story list is a fight. I wonder how that's